Diary of a German non-commissioned officer, 1945, Soldier's Memoirs. It was hell out there. Americans don't look like humans. Germans about the Normandy landings and the Ardennes campaign. We'll take a closer look at what happened, who's to blame, and what it all led to. Support the channel by subscribing, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this video. The topic is far too serious to stay silent. I'm writing these lines many years later, yet the smell of that snow still lingers, as if the smoke never left my eyelashes. The Ardennes forest was quiet, too quiet for a battlefield. And in that silence I first realized that the end of war does not come with a trumpet. It just freezes inside you, slowly. The snow creaked under our boots like it was protesting, and every step felt like the last. We were holding the line, but no one knew whom we feared more, them or ourselves. The Americans moved steadily, unhurried, yet with a kind of iron determination, as if they were driven not by orders but by something deeper. I remember their fire, calm, precise, without panic. Not like ours when we shot everything out of despair. They fired short and accurate bursts. When we answered, they had already changed position. We were shooting at ghosts. I wrote that day. They do not look like men because men do not move so calmly inside a storm. And that wasn't a metaphor. They seemed to live within their own rhythm, where even death followed a schedule. We, exhausted and half-broken, believed we could stop them with numbers, with fire, with cunning. But they possessed what we had lost: patience. The patience to keep moving when the cold bites into your joints, when every minute feels like an hour. That day, I first feared silence itself. Silence was not peace. It was a warning. From it came footsteps, engines, voices. They advanced not loudly but correctly. At night, with the moon hanging like a frozen cartridge, we could hear them move. No rustle, no shout. Just a branch cracking, then a flash. We fired into the white, into nothing. Then darkness again, and the sound of tracks, like someone dragging an iron chain across the ice. I remember Hans trembling beside me, whispering, "They are everywhere, even where they cannot be." When dawn came, the fog lay low, breathing with the earth. I rose to my knees and saw them ahead, moving evenly, step by step, without yelling. We opened fire, and none of them dropped. They just kept walking until they reached our line. When they entered the smoke, I understood that we were already defeated, not in battle, but in spirit. Because they advanced not as men, but as a mechanism where fear had no place, only function. Later we fell back, not because of orders, but because hearts gave out. I saw one of them lift a fallen comrade, not looking around, not checking for fire, just pulling and walking. There was no heroism in that motion, only necessity. That was worse than heroism. We were taught that bravery is a flash of glory. For them, it was routine. That evening, I wrote briefly, "We lost to those who can endure." I didn't yet know that this sentence would define the rest of my life. When the frost grew harsher, we hid in a wrecked house by the road. Snow drifted through holes in the roof onto sleeping men. I snapped a pencil in half and wrote, "If this is the end, let it be honest." The next day, we saw their armored columns moving through forest roads we had marked as impassable. We'd mined them. They seemed to know exactly where. I saw one of their engineers crawling forward, touching the snow with his hand, as if feeling the earth beneath. Minutes later, our traps were gone. I thought then, they listened to the ground better than we know it. Every step they took was a decision, not a reflex. They didn't rush. We shot. They fell. But another rose instantly. It wasn't an army. It was a flow. You cannot defeat water moving downhill. You just stand until it washes you away. That day the sky turned heavy, pressing down on us. Their artillery worked the grid. The ground trembled like a living animal. We tried to answer, but our answer came out as coughing. When it was over, only a handful from our company remained, yet we still held the line. Somewhere ahead I heard their radios, short, clipped, fast. Our commands crawled along the chain like tired men. Theirs flew like sparks. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the snow listening to the frost crack. Time itself felt like it was breaking. We all waited for the end, not knowing what the word meant. When I saw their flag at dawn over the road, I felt no rage, only emptiness, not surrender, just silence. Then I began to wonder who they really were. We had been taught to mock them, slow, spoiled, clumsy, overconfident. But there, in that snow, I saw not arrogance, but knowledge. They knew why they moved, and that knowledge replaced everything else: fear, pity, fatigue. We marched because of orders. They marched because of purpose. Now, decades later, I understand. The Ardennes weren't just a defeat. They were punishment for arrogance. We believed power lay in iron and numbers, but power lay in the ability to breathe calmly while the world collapses. When I remember that evening, charred trees, grey snow, fire on the horizon, I still hear one comrade say, "They are not human. They are made of iron." And I replied, "No, they just learned to stay human longer than we did." I later learned that their offensive in the Ardennes was their last big push. For them, the road to victory. For us, the edge of extinction. But in those days, no one thought of politics. We just wanted to live. I remember sitting in a cellar, holding my rifle like a cross, thinking, if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow, then everything is decided. Yet morning came, the light spilled across snow-stained pink. For a moment it was beautiful, painfully beautiful. I walked along the road, past their vehicles, some with frozen ropes, some scarred with holes, and still each felt alive, as if even the metal remembered its purpose. We hadn't lost to their numbers, we lost to their meaning. They had one, we didn't. When they captured us, I expected hatred. Instead, calm, no mockery, no revenge. They gave water, cigarettes, sometimes bread. It confused me. I looked at their faces and saw no triumph, only fatigue, deep human fatigue. Then I knew, they paid too, maybe even more dearly. Even now I smell the mix of powder, fuel and snow. Whenever rain hits metal roofs, I hear that bombardment again. But there's no hatred left in me, only respect. Because an enemy who teaches you to see yourself becomes your unseen teacher. But the war didn't start for me there. My mind drifts further back, to the shore where it all began. To the days we still laughed, believing the sea was our shield. We stood on cliffs, sure no one would dare. They dared. And the world cracked open. I remember the morning the sea began to roar, as if the ocean itself decided to attack. The radio was silent. The sky hung low and grey. Then the engines came. One, then dozens. The vibration passed through the ground into my chest. At first we thought it was training. Then the horizon filled with silhouettes, ships, hundreds of them. That wasn't training. That was destiny. We watched as the waves carried boats straight toward us. They came into the fire, not zigzagging, not hiding. We fired everything we had. Water exploded, men fell, boats burned, but more kept coming. My commander shouted, they must not reach the shore. But they were already there. They crawled from the surf, heavy, soaked, alive, and didn't stop. I saw one fall, another grab his weapon without even looking at his face. No one pushed them. They simply moved. That was the first time I feared not bullets, but certainty. We thought our bunkers were impenetrable, that concrete and steel would protect us. But concrete cracks faster than will. They hit precisely, meter by meter, as if each distance had been measured before. When their shells struck our bunkers, I smelled burnt metal and hair. The air thickened, heavy and hot. I was choking on smoke and fear. Through the slit, I saw a tank crawling up the beach, slow, unstoppable. Bullets ricocheted off its armor like flies on glass. We fired our rockets, but every shot felt like a scream. They kept coming, wave after wave. I saw men crushed under their own tracks, yet the tanks never stopped. It wasn't cruelty, it was resolve. They knew the price of every second. Then I understood. We were fighting not against men, but against a will that never paused. Someone shouted, "They are not afraid." I answered, "They are. They just know how to walk with it." When our positions caught fire, we fell back toward the inland. I ran past the body of a comrade and didn't stop. Conscience had no time to speak. The roar was endless, the ground alive. I remember the taste of salt and sand sticking to my face. The guns thundered until the chest itself vibrated. And still, amid that inferno, I saw one of them stop to bandage a wounded man under fire, not for glory, just because it had to be done. I couldn't believe my eyes. Later we retreated through the fields. That night I wrote, "They do not look like men because there is no chaos inside them." We thought chaos meant life. Maybe order is another kind of madness. They moved like one body, each man in place. No panic, no arguing, only motion. Back then I didn't fear their weapons, I feared their silence. When they captured ground, there was a moment of absolute quiet. No shots, no shouting, just wind. And in that wind, something unearthly, as if the earth itself listened to them. We Germans thought victory should roar, theirs whispered. One night I watched them hauling ammo boxes in darkness, without light, without words, dozens of shadows moving as one. I didn't understand how they communicated. In the morning I realized they simply didn't need to. Everyone already knew. That is power, not in shouting, not in orders, but in awareness. When we were later sent back toward the Ardennes, I was no longer the man who had stood above the sea. Fear lived in us, but it also drove us. We wanted to prove we could stop them, though deep down we knew we couldn't. All that remained was to fall with dignity. In the Ardennes, I saw their faces again, dusty, tired, the same men who had climbed from the water in Normandy. I recognized them by their eyes. No hatred, no pride, only calm. When they took prisoners, they didn't yell, didn't hit. They just looked through you. That look belonged to people who had seen too much to celebrate. As we marched through a shattered village, I noticed a young American with an armband carrying a crate of shells. No fear, no joy, only exhaustion. I thought, that's the difference. They got tired first, and that's why they lasted longer. Years passed before I could sleep without hearing engines. Every thunderclap still sounds like their advance. But the farther time goes, the clearer one truth becomes. We faced an enemy we never understood. We laughed at their softness, and that softness became armor. We worshipped training, their strength was simplicity. They didn't force themselves, they just went on. Rereading my old notes, I find a sentence I once ignored. When you see the enemy as human, war ends inside you. Back then I didn't grasp it. Now I do. Everything I saw, their fire, their iron, their calm, was human too, just a different shade of it. More patient, more complete. We lost everything, but we kept memory. If anything remains from those years, it's the memory of people who didn't give up. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't betray their order. They believed every meter was worth blood. We believed blood was worth meters. That's the difference. Sometimes I sit by the window and hear rain tapping the glass, sounding like tracks over wet asphalt. I close my eyes and see grey snow, black trees, faces fading in smoke. We were all part of the same mistake, standing on opposite sides of its mirror. They believed in freedom, we in order, and theirs proved stronger. I'm old now. My hands tremble as I write, but I write because I want someone to understand. In that hell, I saw not monsters but men. Men who walked forward while the earth burned. I saw them bury comrades and keep moving. I saw their machines become fire and still push ahead. I saw them win not by strength, but by character. I don't seek forgiveness. Forgiveness is a privilege of the living. I write for memory, so someone opening these pages may understand. War isn't only screams and blood, it's also silence, fear, and respect. Respect for an enemy who turned out to be just as human. Now snow falls outside again, slow and quiet, just like back then. And in that white silence I can still hear the distant hum of engines, of footsteps, of voices. A hum that never fades as long as we remember.